Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. This is the second meeting of the Act 156 Task Force on Parentage Laws. It's about 3:02 p.m. and I see we have a quorum, so I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'll identify the people who are present. So there's myself. Mr. Kim isn't here. Mr. Pham is here. Mr. Esmond is here. Judge Hall is here. Ms. Lockwood is here. Dr. Fratarelli is not here. Dr. Andaya is here. Ms. Johnston is here. I think I know Mr. Taylor couldn't make it. Mr. Nugent couldn't make it. I don't see Geraldine Hasegawa. I don't see Miss Ito and Ms. Marie Iha is here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that is a quorum. And as I might have mentioned earlier, another member is the appointee from the Commission on the Status of Women, but they haven't sent a member yet. And then I see we have one more person joining us. Dr. Fratarelli.
Dr. Fratarelli is here now. Yep.
And okay. And instead of going through, last time I had each person say if they had someone in the room with them, but I'll just ask all at once if anyone who's appearing on Zoom is with someone in the room who is 18 years or older, or someone who is younger than 18 but has business before the task force, please speak up. But hearing nothing, I'm just going to assume that no one needs to make a disclosure. So we can move on to our first and only action item, which is the discussion and formation of one or more permitted interaction groups to assist us in matters relating to our official business, including recommending amendments to the Uniform Parentage Laws. So last time we discussed that we would be working off the latest draft of the Uniform Parentage Laws. I see Ms. Hasegawa is here too, so great. So yeah, last time we discussed that we would be working off the latest draft of the Uniform Parentage Act, which Judge Hall kindly provided. So today I'd like to form one or more permitted interaction groups, or PIGs as we can call them, to review the draft and determine if any revisions should be made. And then, according to Sunshine Law, the PIG would then have to come back to the group at a public meeting and discuss their findings. We also have to be very precise, I guess, in this meeting when we define the PIGs. We have to define the scope of what their investigation is going to be. We have to identify the members. And once we set the members, we can't change those until we come back to another meeting. And also each PIG can only have, they have to have less than a quorum of people. So they have to have less than 8 people if we're going to make any PIGs. So yeah, I'd like to, discuss today how, what people think about how many groups we might need and what the focuses of those groups should be. And maybe, if we do more than one group, maybe we should talk about the order in which they should kind of review any draft. So I just wanted to start off by noting that when I looked at the purpose of the act that Judge Hall circulated, I saw at least 3 general topics that maybe we should focus on, and not saying that these are, it's an exhaustive list. And I'm not necessarily saying that I think each topic needs to have a separate group. I think a group could look at more than one topic, obviously. But just looking at that draft law, I saw that it's one of its goals was to protect the interests of the LGBTQ community. Another group was children born through assisted reproductive technology. And I also think we need, one of the focuses of our group should be like making sure that the act can be practically enforced, through the courts, and the practitioners can give input on that. And then also maybe the medical professionals can tell us if some of these things, are actually if this describes what is happening in the real world. So those were just kind of my initial thoughts. And yeah, I wanted to, I guess, open it up to discussion to see if people had more specific thoughts on what groups we should form, and the order that they should do their work.
Lauren, I like those. I might add one more, is just a group to focus just on the paternity sections, not necessarily. So we can have a group focusing on the paternity, a group focusing on the surrogacy and assisted reproduction. I don't know if you want to break those two up also, because otherwise it's a lot for one group to have to review.
Great. And I was also thinking about, whether we should have the groups focus on different sections. And I think we could give them that focus, but I think the group should have the ability to look beyond and, identify things that might necessarily have to change in other sections too. But yeah, I think we should, if there are specific sections that need attention, I think we should note that. So sorry, you said the paternity section, and then what else? There was another.
Well, there's two distinct, or unless you want to call them three distinct areas. One is the paternity section, and then there's assisted reproduction, assisted reproduction, and then there's surrogacy. I'm open if as you want to combine assisted reproduction and surrogacy, that's not a problem. But paternity and then the assisted reproduction and surrogacy, although there's overlapping things, they're pretty distinctly separate.
I agree that it makes sense to break out the parentage because it's used for such different purposes in the courts. A lot of times there's a very, very distinct purpose of some of the paternity laws compared to the assisted reproduction. I kind of feel like I won't know until we get further into it whether we should be treating the surrogacy and assisted reproduction as two different sections or one section, because I think we might find they end up more intertwined than we're thinking as we look at the specific types of ways we use them. I also noticed there's some discussion of donor identification. I know that was a concern for in particular one of our members. And so I wondered if that was also an area that would be worth having a group on. You're there, right? I think I can see you there.
Yeah, Carol,
I'm sorry. You go ahead.
Oh,
I think we should organize around the bill that we have in front of us. I would love it if we could get it formatted so it has line numbers. It would be much easier to discuss if we had line numbers. I don't know if that's something we can do, like in the typical legislative format. But I think the overall purposes that Lauren read back from the bill, those things are appearing across the entire thing. So there's no point in trying to look at it from just that. I think we should organize it around the work that we already have that's in front of us in terms of review, but that every group should be able to look at the other provisions to the extent they interact. Like, for example, everyone has to look at the definition section, things like that, right? Because it's not going to be possible there is no neat division between any of this, right? My instinct would be to put the assisted reproduction and surrogacy provisions together because they read interlocked. Like this one applies, but this doesn't, and the distinctions about how they function differently are going to matter. If I'm trying to understand this bill, I would read those together, right? Yeah. So anyway, that would be my instinct, is not to attempt to organize around the purpose of the bill, but around the sections of the bill. Like what kind of laws is it attempting to amend? And for myself, I'd be happy to help on one of these groups. I'm going to read the whole thing and study the whole thing because you have to understand the whole thing, right? And so it may be that there will be, sort of from the benefit of studying one provision as your focus, you may think of something that matters for another one, right? That would be my instinct. And the reason why is because the goal is a piece of legislation and this is what we have. So we should organize around the goal.
I wanted to respond to Carol's comment, and yes, I do think that the issue with regard to availability of donor information to the children, it probably cross-cuts, across the bill. I would hate for us to turn this into just a bill drafting committee, because I think there's issues that we need to discuss in more depth that we didn't get to before. And if you read the preamble, it talks about outdated laws. Well, it doesn't just have to do with LGBTQ. It has to do with outdated laws around secrecy. So I think we need to remember that and maybe hash some of that out. So I understand why Lauren said what she said, because as a former bill drafter, probably too many years, you have to be careful and make sure you're doing what the legislature asked you to do. It's hard enough to get a bill through, but certainly if you're not doing what they asked, it's going to be even harder. So, and I've always been a proponent of an 80% solution, to be honest with you, because I've had to draft many laws from the air. Okay, like, please draft a bill that does XYZ. And sometimes in Hawaii, we actually were more forward thinking than we thought. And so I had to draft it out of the air, and it was an 80% solution. No bill will ever get us to 100% ever, because there's something we will never, and the lawsuits, as you all know, will be out there while we're doing this. So that's just my advice at this point, is we make sure that we pay attention to the preamble and maybe some of the testimony. How we organize it, I'm sort of, I will be expressing my voice however I can. So I don't have a really strong position on that, but it's going to be a hard thing to do, for sure. And thank you, Judge Hall. She's been very valiant in trying to get it done.
Lauren, Jerry Hasegawa, may I make some comments?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, with regard to the topics, I agree with Deidre that as far as the surrogacy and the assisted reproduction, it should be together. But I also think that we should have another section, and that is the paternity aspects of this bill, that is the non-judicial and judicial proceedings, not only the definition, but the jurisdiction, the service, the genetic testing, all those which are really addressed in the bill. I think that should be a separate topic.
Right. Yeah, and I was trying to think about how we might, organize things, like if someone, for example, if a group is going through the bill with the eye of like looking at it from the lens of, protecting LGBTQ families, like, does it make sense for them to do that kind of review first before another group looks at like the procedural aspects, like the paternity establishment sections? Or if we do it at the same time, is that efficient? Does anyone have thoughts on like maybe how we should order a review?
Why can't we all be looking at it all at once?
I think we can. I think it's just that there might be, if people are looking at similar sections, like you said, we all need to look at the definitions, for example, and there might be like conflicting proposals for that. Like, do we want to layer the review so we can like address each revision?
I don't think it's going to be possible to divide it up as neatly as we might like. I mean, I'm the kind of person who left my own devices will like color code a chart and do everything in a very logical order, but a giant piece of legislation that has all these moving parts, every part is going to touch every other part. Everything's going to be all interaction. There's not going to be any way to be like, we'll do it in this exact order. So to me, I think we should organize around sort of larger principles of some kind. You know what I mean? Like this concept, reproductive assisted technology or whatever, as a concept, but then you're going to have to go through the whole thing. And there's not going to be a way to have it be like, we're going to go through it first to make sure it protects same-sex couples. And then after that, we're going to go through it, because people will be asking their concerns all the time. I think it wouldn't be efficient. Because then what you could have is a suggested amendment, which would be an improvement to protect same-sex couples, but might have the unintended consequence of somehow weakening the protection for some other people or something, right? Depending on what provision you're talking about. And to me, there's no need to should discuss all that stuff all at the same time.
Okay.
It is an interesting question though, Lauren, though, because it is kind of a layered thing, right? Because some of us could be wordsmithing about how to make something happen the most effectively and most efficiently, and somebody else might be thinking, should this even happen? You know,
Right.
are we working on wordsmithing a bill that assumes something is permissible that I don't even think should be permissible? And I don't know how we get to that level. But you know, we're not necessarily required to buy into everything that's in here already. But it is a kind of a different question. I can be working with, you know, Judge Hall and some surrogacy stuff. There could be someone else saying, I don't even think surrogacy should be allowed, you know, because we haven't talked about those big issues.
Right. I think that's why Lauren started. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'm Carol, like you, I'm kind of a policy person first. And I don't think the policies, some of these overarching policies ever really got discussed and dug into. So, I mean, myself, frankly, I'm only here because I have a personal interest in it. The rest of you all have some professional interest, I believe, except maybe Jeff. Well, no, Jeff. But, you know, so I have no idea what your personal interest is, except for the people that disclosed it. So it's kind of, you know, we're presuming to some degree that the policy aspects of this bill are all okay, and I don't think that you can presume that.
And that is something we never got
Right.
able to do in the first task force.
Right. That's
Yeah.
why you made a valiant effort, Judge Hall, but it's been hard because we didn't get to that kind of discussion.
Well, you know, and
Right.
we can give a very concrete example of that, right? Because you and I have had some discussions, right? We probably have different views on the use of anonymous donors, in part because I use it in my professional life and because my sons were both born through an anonymous donor. And I know you have very different concerns, and we've kind of talked about whether there are compromises there. But we could go off and work on a part of a bill that's about how anonymous donors play into the system. You might still be saying, I don't even think there should be anonymous donors, you know, if that's the position you were going to take. So you were what I had in mind when I was thinking about this, is I can go off and help wordsmith and try to make something really
Right.
effective, but somebody else might think, hey, that provision shouldn't even be permissible.
Right.
Understood.
Right. So I guess the question, Deirdre, was if we could only have 8 people on the permitted interaction. I always get stuck on that. I hate to say pig because it just sounds
Permitted
offensive, but I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't like that
basically-
acronym either.
I know
The
that's what
interaction
changed
group.
that law.
Does that make us piglets?
Yeah, I think so. But how do we
I
choose
kinda like
the
that
people,
better.
I guess is the problem.
Yeah. Well, we can have more
Well,
than.
I mean, maybe I just don't know, because I'm not really familiar with the efforts of the prior task force or the efforts that generated the version of the bill that Judge Hall circulated. So you'll have to forgive my ignorance on that. But if there are, you guys can recall from those previous efforts, you know, the points of disagreement that need to be revisited. Maybe that is what we should do first, right? Because I was under the impression from our last conversation that the surrogacy and assisted reproduction provisions, that's where the major point of controversy was. I did not know that there was controversy about the other provisions. So that's sort of where I was coming from, but just because that's all I picked up at our last meeting. So if you guys think, because this is building on prior efforts, that we should first resolve like the bigger policy questions, absolutely, I agree that should be resolved first, right, before we start to write something, right? Because you have to have a general agreement that there's consensus about the objective of the provisions, right?
I'm not sure we even had those discussions with the prior task force.
Yeah,
I think honestly, I think the effort we're building on here is Judge Hall's efforts. Because she
Okay.
took a very amorphous process and made it extremely concrete for us through the sweat of her labor. So we don't look, in a way, we don't have to worry that much about what the prior task force did because there wasn't that much to it. But that means these issues have never been addressed in, you know, either task force. Obviously, we're just getting started, and I don't know the best way to do it. I just know, you know, because I happen to have had these conversations, I know that we're not necessarily all on the same page from a policy perspective. I could very happily take this bill and just work on the bill, but that's because I have a similar perspective, I think, to Judge Hall, because I work, you know, in the same kind of areas.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, in that case, I don't know where the discussion points are that need to happen, the policy conversations that need to happen, but assuming that they can be identified, that I would have those conversations first, and either by majority or ideally, you know, a consensus or close to it, have the task force decide which direction it thinks should be the recommendation to the legislators to go on those policy points. And then you start figuring out the drafting, right?
Yeah.
If it turns out, I hope, since the bill is 100 pages, that not all of those 100 pages have something to discuss on policy grounds on them, pretty please. Otherwise, we will never finish this. But if there's stuff where, you know, there's a general agreement about the objective of those provisions as drafted, that is the legislative objective that the task force should recommend, then that stuff, people can start looking at them for drafting purposes, right? For, you know, for consistency purposes, for making sure it's pragmatic. My role with this, and the reason I was asked to contribute, is because I worked on the Marriage Equality Act 10 years ago, and you know, we were just stuck with these laws that were such antiquated even 10 years ago and are even worse now. And so that's kind of the perspective I'm coming to. Well, what we used to do, and when I was reading this version of the bill, I started to do the same thing, is I started to run through hypotheticals in my head. You know, this person's married to this person crosses state lines and gets pregnant. I mean, you know, like trying to figure out what would happen, right? I used to call them the soap opera scenarios because they got all very dramatic, be trying to figure out how the law would work. That's what I would do looking at these laws. If there was a decision about, okay, this is the policy objective and we're agreed on that, then I would study the provision and see if I could yank at it and is it going to accomplish that, right? Anyway.
Could we ask people to join the PIGs that address that in the area where their policy concerns are? And then maybe one of the first functions of the PIGs is to at least identify and bring back to the group where those policy differences might be. Would that work maybe?
Kind of give some that's come up over the years, but I think Thaddeus, did you want to say something first?
Oh yeah, sorry, Thaddeus, I saw it.
Thanks, Judge. I just wanted to know, because I have to leave at 3:30, so I just wanted to make a point that if there is a permitted interaction group that focuses on the needs of LGBTQIA plus people, I would love to be on that. And just thinking through, I noticed that there's certain, you know, some folks are much more familiar in speaking to legislative bill and policy stuff, whereas other folks are invited to this to provide perspective as community members or people with lived experience. So I also want to create, if we're trying to discuss these policy tensions, to create space for, you know, other voices who aren't as familiar with the nuts and bolts of bill making and process to provide insight as well. So I'm thinking if we do establish, I don't like saying PIGs either, but whatever, I'll just say POGs or something.
Committees.
Committees, yeah. If we can ensure maybe like each one also, if possible, has someone with a lived experience or, you know, a personal interest, as well as someone with some sort of bill making legislative expertise, then they could have, you know, at least we can all have some sort of different levels of review or understanding in these little subcommittees. So that was just some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Dad. That's really good. Yeah.
So go ahead, Jeff.
Hi, I'm Park. I wanted to throw out a thought and a question. First of all, I feel somewhat inadequate by not being an attorney and being so unexposed to all of this, and it's stressful to me talking about the bill like that. But I definitely have personal experiences with multiple aspects of this, as well as personal opinions. But I'm struggling with understanding exactly how to fulfill my role, because I don't really represent myself or a community. I represent the State Commission on Fatherhood. So I'm just saying that I'm not exactly sure how to put that into action when you talk about policy, et cetera, because that's my role on this task force. The other thing is, and I'm really going to embarrass myself by asking this, but can you please remind me, because we said this was brought up in the first meeting, what this draft bill is and what its history was exactly?
So this is a draft based off the 2017 Uniform Parentage Act, proposed Uniform Parentage Act, that was created by the Uniform Laws Committee. I had initially started drafting it back in 2018, and in, I think it was 2021, there were some bills that came through and a task force was created to discuss it. That didn't get very far, unfortunately, because of COVID, the Red Hill water issues. DOH was in charge of the committee. So we just unfortunately didn't get to have these discussions that we're actually even having right now. And then it kind of died again for a little while, because we were trying to meet with groups and see if there's middle grounds that we can figure out that we can meet up in and make this successful. And then in 2023, as part of the judiciary package, we did submit a smaller version that took out the surrogacy and assisted reproduction. It was just the paternity section. And that brought us to this task force today.
That was a good summary.
So the issues that have come up
Thank you.
in the past with the paternity section is the fact of changing it to parentage and no longer having the, it has to be a male and determining who the male on the birth certificate will be. That's kind of how the statute reads now. Was to make the language gender neutral, which this past year a bill did pass that requires us to make a lot of our language gender neutral in most of our statutes. So it was to try to accomplish that. So one of the issues that does come from that is making the language gender neutral also makes it possible that a same-sex couple, I'll be honest, it'll probably be mostly women, because I'm not quite sure how males would do it, but same-sex couples could be placed on the birth certificate from birth through this statute without having to be married. So one partner could give birth and the other partner could sign to be the other parent. That was one issue. Then the other issues are more around the surrogacy and assisted reproduction sections. And I don't think there's a lot of controversy, at least that has come up with regards to surrogacy and assisted reproduction itself. It's more about the information of the genetic donors and how that information is preserved.
I think there was a little bit with some of the people that were involved last time around, a little bit of we haven't even gotten into the question of, the whole exploitation of women and things like that, concerns that some people
That's
have.
true.
A little bit. But interestingly enough, those stakeholders who are driving that whole process haven't seemed to get as involved this time around.
And they didn't testify
Yeah.
really during the legislative sessions either. So
Yeah.
Carol, are you inquiring about like whether women who serve as surrogates are being mistreated or pressured or something like that? Is that what you're
Well, I
referring
mean,
to?
I'm not, because I deal with
Yeah.
them all the time, and so I know what kind of screening
No.
process they go
Like
through.
the
But
concern you were referring
there
to.
were, yeah, there
I
were
just
some,
was
there,
trying to translate. Yeah.
when somebody objects to surrogacy, that's usually the basis on which they try to do it, which is, claims about exploitation and stuff. But it's typically people who don't know, how they're selected and the process they go through, and that, people with, indigent women are not eligible because you never want somebody to be economically, coerced and that kind of stuff. So,
Fair
but that
enough.
is
Yeah.
that's typically the policy objection that is raised, that or a religious-based exception. Those are exception, excuse me, are the ones that are usually objection are the ones that are usually raised. It's Friday afternoon. It's hard to talk.
Yeah.
I'm out of words.
Definitely the caffeine has worn off by now.
Working on it.
The bill that you mentioned that passed that said that it was requiring language to be made gender neutral, I'm assuming that's quite an undertaking. It's like is Legislative Reference Bureau supposed to go through the entire code and do that? That's going to take them a while.
yeah, don't think it's actually anyone's tried to implement that yet, to be honest with you.
Okay. I
So I don't
remember
know
the
where that
Marriage Equality
stands right
Act
now.
had in it a provision that says that the gendered terms of marriage are to include two spouses regardless of gender. So 2 men married, 2 women married, 2 people who don't want to use the gender married, it doesn't matter. They would still get the benefit or the obligation that attaches to that status as a matter of law, even if the statute says husband and wife or widow or widower or any of those gendered terms, right? Anyway, but your answer basically answers that it is still necessary to draft those changes for what is now the paternity code, right?
Right.
Okay, I see. All right. Well, my interest would be in helping with the surrogacy and assisted reproduction provisions, but frankly, I can't do too much. But I've done a lot of legislative drafting and looked at a lot of bills. So I'm happy if you guys think that maybe wordsmithing would be the best use of my time. I'd be happy to do that. My major interest is to make sure that same-sex couples don't have to jump through all these ridiculous hoops in order to, adopt their own children and all the things that they have to do now. However, in order to understand whether the bill will accomplish that objective, I would need people who had more expertise with the day-to-day of how that actually happens to tell me whether it's going to achieve it, because I don't know enough about that. I'm motivated by the issue. But when I look at it, I go, well, is that going to solve their problem? Like, I'm not quite sure, because I don't actually know, what the nitty-gritty problem that has to be solved, for, two men married using a surrogate. What are the legal steps, and what is the most streamlined way that we can make the law work for them, right? So I'd be happy to do that. But when I read through it, admittedly quite quickly to prepare for this meeting, I started highlighting phrases I didn't understand or things that I thought were, unclear. So I would be willing to just look at it that way if you want, in terms of like, is it going to work? And you let somebody else tell me what is it supposed to do, and then I will look at it to see whether it will legislatively achieve its desired objective, right? So I did have one question, Judge Hall. I'm not asking anyone to create this, but is there anywhere in existence anything that is a list that shows me the difference between this proposed legislation and the Uniform Act by itself? I know it was if that
I'll have to look.
anywhere?
I may have that. I know the Uniform Laws Committee had kind of put one together for me at one point, because they
Yeah.
have to compare the two to make sure that they were all right with the changes that I had made.
Right, and that we were close enough, because I know
Right.
they'll let the states deviate a little and still be counted as uniform. Because I've worked with uniform laws in the past, I would find that really helpful to look at, because I would probably also look at the uniform law and, are the differences just the way we choose to express ourselves, or is it like a substantive difference creating some kind of policy difference? I would look at that just for interest, to understand the intricacies of the legislation. I would love to see that if you have it, but I'm not asking anybody to create it if it doesn't exist.
No, let me look to see if I can find it. And if
Great,
I
thank
can,
you.
I'll
I'd
send it
appreciate
out
that.
through Lauren.
Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah.
And Judge Hall, if you do have it, I would also like to see it.
Yeah, Lauren, I'll send it to Lauren, and Lauren can send it out to everybody.
Yeah,
you.
have our staff do that.
So it sounds like, Lauren, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's some interest in having a paternity/parentage pig that would be perhaps for those people in the group who work more on the CSEA and kind of classic parentage side.
Yeah.
And then also one for the surrogacy and assisted reproductive technology side. Maybe also one for the donor identification issue. I don't know if that's what you were thinking. And then possibly an LGBTQ. I don't know if people prefer for that to be a separate pig or members in every pig looking at that issue, or.
I think I'm leaning more towards,
Yeah,
just,
go ahead.
I think I'm leaning more towards the latter, at least for the LGBTQ issues, because that is something that does touch both.
Everything, yeah.
And and I think we have enough members where we could, have people with personal experiences on both pigs if we do that. But sorry.
No. I was just going to respond to Deidre that Deidre, you have to understand it is not ridiculous to ask a non-genetic parent to have to do an adoption just because they're married. I mean, that's what adoption is. So you have to be careful when you say that, because I understand for the LGBTQ community, they feel discriminated against because a opposite sex couple can do all kind of stuff and maybe not adoption, okay? But the whole point of adoption, I mean, the history of adoption is you are having non-genetic people parent this child, right? So one of the parents, probably in a same gender couple, is not a genetic parent, right? Unless I'm missing something.
Well, I mean, as far as I know, that there's no way to do it otherwise. If it's a same-sex couple, right? One of them must not be genetically related.
Right.
Certainly, yeah. No, I understand that. I'm assuming that if we keep an eye on all of these issues, there'll be a way to have the bill work for same-sex couples, and also to make sure that adoptive families are treated fairly. I'm certainly not looking to exclude anyone.
Yeah, I don't think it's an exclusion. I think maybe that's why we need to have the more in-depth informed. I have pages of resources that I don't want to overload anybody with, but I mean, I did a 30-minute web search and I came up with at least a dozen different articles from, these are not, you know, I'm not a social media person. This is about what's happened, how technology has basically, it's so light years ahead of our laws, okay, including adoption.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, and
Yeah.
so we don't want to write a law that makes us look like we haven't been paying attention to the inconvenient truths about DNA, okay, and the fact that people are finding each other, and sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's a disaster, but we certainly don't want to pass a law that says we're going to keep people from knowing each other when that's practically impossible these days. I mean, that's like ridiculous. So that let's not draft a law that has a state saying, well, you can't know each other, when that's really not a feasible goal.
So I'm wondering, do we think, sorry, go ahead, Georgia. You can.
Oh, no, I mean, I wasn't meaning to address any of that. So I would say for myself, I would like to receive some more information about your concerns, mostly because I honestly just don't feel like I don't know that much about it. In terms of like the secrecy and genetic information, I would say that I don't really know that much about that. So I certainly didn't mean to make any statement about that at all. So I hope that's clear. I wasn't meaning.
No, Deidre, it's not just
whatever I was saying was.
You're in the majority.
Yeah.
Most people don't understand.
Okay, yeah, so I'll just say I don't know, and I'm not going to be overwhelmed if you want to share some documents.
Okay.
To help me educate myself about that. I would like to know more about it, what the different concerns are. And I'd also like to know sort of where other states have landed with the reality of DNA testing, the reality of people being able to trace their genetic parents, even if they were conceived through a donor. We know that happens, right? So anyway, I personally feel like I don't really know that much.
Yeah, I'll work through Lauren.
Jeff, I see your hand was up.
Yeah, there's something that I've seen that other gay male couples do, and I really don't know how it comes out in practicality or in real life, but because two men tend to be incredibly idealistic and not really knowing what we're doing, and so there's a lot of couples out there that they mix their donation, and so to leave it
I call that shake and bake.
Yeah, and they don't really want to know. This is not what we did. They don't want to know the results. So I have absolutely no clue what's going on with the birth certificate there. I just thought I'd throw it out that I see that, and it seems to be there's a lot of couples that are doing that.
They have to know in the state of Hawaii right now. When they tell me they want to do it, I tell them they have to. I don't know, Judge Hall, if you disagree, but by all means, let me know. But I tell them they have to know in order to finalize.
And this is something I see online that's not necessarily in Hawaii. It's more elsewhere. So yeah.
So yeah, my thought was that topic seems like, I mean, it does cross the paternity and the assisted reproduction sections, but I feel like it might be worth having another group on this, because it does seem like more in depth. So what I'm kind of hearing is like, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like we're talking about maybe 3 groups, like an assisted reproduction and surrogacy group, a paternity, like like legal paternity, I guess we would say, or parentage now, like legal parentage group, and then maybe like I don't know what I would call this group law, like a Laurel, like a genetic
Donor identification.
donor identification. Would it just be donors though, or are we talking
No,
about?
I guess yeah.
No, because if we make it the paternity section gender neutral, it would be, it would cover that too. So
Yeah, maybe like a genetic information,
Yeah, you could
genetic
call
heritage.
it rights of children,
Okay, we could. Yeah,
children's rights. I mean,
That
Yeah.
that might be a little broad though for the purposes of this task
yeah, I
force.
know. I mean, yeah, but
but everyone, we have to keep in mind too, we're limited by the fact that a birth certificate is a legal document and not a genetic document.
right.
well, is that, I mean, is that what came out of Obergefell? I mean, that's the thing, I guess I've been waiting to get a response from somebody. I mean, why are we saying that?
Well, because, for example, husband and wife, as long as you're married and a child is born of that marriage, even if the husband is not the genetic parent, he is automatically put on the birth certificate. Same with the paternity statute, the current voluntary establishment of paternity. Anybody willing to sign, or any male willing to sign and waive their right to a genetic test is automatically put on the birth certificate.
Okay, is that good policy?
But that's how the law is right
For
now.
decades,
with
yeah,
regards to a
Well,
birth
but-
certificate, it's a birth
Centuries.
certificate is by law a legal document, not a biological document.
Right, but we're talking about changing the law.
But we're only talking about changing this section. It wouldn't affect the divorce section, which would still allow for it.
Okay, well, I guess I just see it as a bigger issue, but I mean, I hear what you're saying. Just
May I
because
say
we've been doing it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, but okay.
May I say something? This is Jerry.
Yes, please.
With regard to the children born of the marriage, the presumption is that the husband is the father. However, at the hospital, if the mother says that she is married, but the father of the child is not my husband, then it's left blank. It's not required that the husband be on the child's birth certificate. With regard to having the male sign, and that is where mother and the alleged father are not married to each other, through the voluntary establishment of paternity process, it's an opportunity for the right now the biological father to acknowledge that he is the father of the child, assuming that the child was not born within 300 days of mother being married. This male who is coming forth and saying, I'm the father of this child, he can then be put on the, he can sign his name on the voluntary establishment of paternity form, but he's also given information as to his rights, his responsibilities, his obligations. And it is a process that we have at the Child Support Enforcement Agency worked with the Department of Health to meet the federal requirements and the state requirements with regard to the establishment outside of the legal, court process. It's a non-judicial process. But there are built-in safeguards that we have created.
Right.
Jerry, isn't it correct that federally we're required to have that type of system in our statute?
Yes, this is the Parole Law 1996, I believe, Personal Responsibility Work Opportunity Act. which is a federal law.
So, yeah, I mean, okay, so I guess where I left off is, yeah, maybe we're at three groups that we think are needed at this point. Does that sound right to everyone? Okay. So I was actually advised that I can like create the scope of the groups and name people to them, and I don't actually need a vote, but I do want to have a vote on this. So and we do have to, you know, I want to make sure we're all on the same page, and I want to make sure that we adequately define like the scope of what the groups are doing. And I obviously want to make sure people who want to be on certain groups can do that. So I guess with the assisted reproduction and surrogacy group, I mean, what would we say, like their, I guess for all of them, would we say that their task is to review and recommend revisions to
How about revisions, comments, and concerns?
Okay.
Because that could include policy differences as well.
Yeah. Okay, so the assisted reproduction and surrogacy group can investigate, you know, independently and as a group, any revisions, comments, and concerns relating to, I'll just say broadly, assisted reproduction and surrogacy. I mean, I don't want to make it too narrow because I don't want to arbitrarily narrow anyone's authority. And then I think that all of the groups, even though they might be focusing on specific sections, I think we've already talked about the fact they need to look at the whole statute. So does anyone want to, I mean, and I guess the other part of the task of each of these groups would be to keep in mind and I guess advance the interests of the LGBTQ community too, because I think that's something that's going to be it's an issue that's going to come up across every topic area. So does anyone want to volunteer to join like the assisted reproduction and surrogacy PIG? Okay, let's see, Carol, Dr. Fraterelli.
Sean Taylor wrote me a text that he would be interested.
Sean
I don't know
Taylor.
if that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he
When
doesn't
I was going off camera, I was texting him to let him know what was going on.
Great. And then Mihoko, is that you too?
Yeah, I'd be happy to serve on that or any other pig. If the groups are too uneven, I'm happy to jump on another one too. That's fine.
And Deirdre, was that you too, or?
Sure, but as long as the group isn't getting too big, right?
Okay. Yeah, so if for this one we have Carol, Dr. Fraterelli, Sean, Mihoko, Deirdre. So that's 5. That's less than 8.
Judge Hall, are you going to be on pigs or?
Oh, yeah. I was gonna,
Yeah, maybe Judge Hall, if you, this is just the assisted reproduction and surrogacy group, but I was thinking maybe you might be more interested in the I guess I'd call it the legal parentage.
parentage, yeah. That's what I was gonna ask for.
Can we only do 1 too? I was wondering, sorry, because not that I'm a glutton for punishment, but.
No, I don't think, so the law doesn't say anything about being on more than 1. I think it's just tricky because if you could with one group and then maybe pass on along communications to the other group, then it kind of like could serial communication with more than a quorum. So I think it just might be tricky to do.
Yeah.
And I would assume our CSCA counterparts, Jerry and Mr. Nugent would want to do the parentage paternity ones.
Yeah, I would.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry.
Thank you very much, Judge Hall. So, Brandon, and I would like to be on the legal parentage group.
Or you mean, sorry,
Oh,
Mark?
not Brandon, I'm sorry, it's Mark.
Mark, yeah.
Yeah,
Brandon was on the other group.
yeah.
Right.
Did Thad say something before he left? I can't recall if he told us what he was interested in.
Oh, that's what he wanted to be on,
LGBTQ.
yeah, he wanted to make sure that LGBTQ voices are heard. So I know that if we're doing the assisted reproduction and surrogacy group, if Sean wants to be on that one, maybe he can be the voice there. And maybe we can have Thad either in the legal parentage group or the genetic information group. Unless anyone else wants to.
Sorry, can I ask a procedural question? Because it
Sure.
always gets confusing with the pigs. So can you attend a meeting but not as a member? Or can you
A
present to a
member of-
meeting of the pig? So let's say,
Mhm.
like, I don't know that I necessarily want to commit to to being on too many, but
Right.
am I allowed to listen in? Or does that violate the law somehow? Because I've never been clear about that.
I think
I'm
that's tricky. I'll have to.
Yeah,
look
I'm
into
sorry to do that, or if I wanted to present information to more than one group, would I be allowed to present without being?
Well, you can also present you could present at a meeting. I guess it's less efficient that way.
Yeah, I just didn't want to, like I said, roll out a bunch of information
Mhm.
until I knew kind of what the scope of these were, because.
Well, you know what? All of these groups so far they're still less than a quorum.
Okay,
So
but-
you'll still be able to. I think you can present. to
Okay,
those
okay, I
stuff.
don't want to commit to being, but I would like to probably present some of this information to all of the groups,
see.
but I would only want to be a member maybe of the last one, so, okay. Sorry for that, gang, I'm just trying
No,
to.
no
No
problem.
worries.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a
everyone's
tough
busy.
question.
So,
And
Jeff
if
had-
possible, Lauren, I would like to be on the donor one as well.
Okay.
And Jeff had his hand up.
Jeff,
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not sure which one to participate with. I feel like I have something connected personally with almost everything between being part of the LGBTQ community, having done surrogacy, having egg donor as well. And the one other experience, which I don't know that anyone else has, is having done international surrogacy and coming in with our birth certificates from India specifically, because I know that international surrogacy is still a big thing right now. The other thing is going back to being a representative of the Commission on Fatherhood. When you're talking about the paternity, I don't know if that's the most appropriate pig, but I would like to be on the pig, and I'm kind of hoping that you guys will advise which is the best one for me to be on based on that background.
I would love to
So
have.
I'm kind of, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Sean.
So I'm actually in the same boat as Jeff. I could apply my background to just about
Mhm.
all of the pigs, which I think I'm the lone person who actually think it's adorable to have that nickname, but I like pigs, so um, so yeah, I'm hoping to get some guidance from you folks. See, yeah, thank you, Carol.
So it's a stress thing.
Yeah, I think they're adorable. Trying to get a miniature pig into our office, but we'll deal with dogs for now. So I am open to where you folks need me. The mental health on both ends with the parents, the interaction with or the legal interaction with the relationship of the caregiver and the child is always important. And there's so many things that comes up as far as the psychology piece of it. So yeah, I'm kind of at a loss which one I most be useful in.
Yeah, I was actually wondering, Dr. Andaya, if you might want to be in this like genetic information, group.
I would be
Yeah,
happy.
because I feel like a part of what Laurel I think is concerned about is like, like the impact of
Yeah.
not knowing your background like on a person. So maybe that could be something you could.
Yep, I most
Yeah,
definitely can
to be
speak to that.
Jeff would be good too but I don't know which one because he does hit a lot of marks that we need to cover.
Yeah, I'd be fine having Jeff in that group and then maybe Thad being in the legal parentage group. Are we missing anybody? Oh, I know Lauren Kim isn't here. But that, I mean, that is also the DOH representative, so we could have them. I mean, Judge Hall, do you think we need a Department of Health representative in the assisted reproduction and surrogacy group?
Honestly, I'd rather them be in the genetic group.
Okay. Maybe I'd have Lauren join that one.
Yeah.
And so just so I confess, I'm sure there are rules somewhere I'm supposed to review. So people on a pig are not allowed to talk to people outside the pig about what the pig is discussing?
Yeah.
I'm
So
going to be cut off from Judge Hall about her legislation. What? Okay.
I mean, I think that
It's not forever, Carol. Just for a little
I
while.
know. I know. I
and
just don't want to mess it up and get in trouble.
any two members can talk to each other about board business as long as they don't, agree to vote a certain way.
Okay.
It just gets tricky because
It is.
you can't, even though maybe you can talk to someone one-on-one, if you talk to a bunch of people one-on-one, that could
Right.
to get to the serial communication rule. So yeah, I think if you talk to Judge Hall separately, apart from
Okay.
just the two of you, that might be okay. But I think you'd have to be careful, not to effectively have put another person into the pig.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But if I had a question about even when I'm reviewing the legislation, if I had a question about the intent of a certain provision or how it was envisioned working or something, I can talk to her about that.
Yeah, I think that should be okay. But yeah, but let's err on the side of be pretty careful.
She'll keep me honest.
And just so nobody's surprised, because this is a year two of the biennium, the bill is probably coming back, but the judiciary is not submitting anything new or separate, but it's still technically alive out there.
Right. Okay. So I think, I guess I'm not accounted for. I wonder if I can join anything.
You have
Did that
time?
on purpose.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
May I say something with regard to adoption? That's another aspect of this group, which is not going to be, as far as the adoption laws, we are not going to be reviewing it. But again, it is, I think, if you're looking at the groups and the way that parentage is established, I think the adoption process is something that, if not this time, at some point in time, it should be reviewed.
I'm 100% hoping that Judge Hall's next project is going to be the adoption statute, because I get asked to get things from judges in Hawaii that I can't even get because we don't even address things like birth mother support and a whole bunch of things. We have a very short adoption statute. So I 100% agree. Thank you for saying that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I think I'll join the legal parentage group. It seemed like that had 2, 3. Yeah, now that has 5. Okay, so I think they all might have 5. I'll go over each group so we're all on the same page here. So, all right, so each group is going to be tasked with discussing and investigating revisions to the existing laws, comments and concerns regarding 3 different topic areas. One group will be looking at assisted reproduction and surrogacy, and the members of that group will be Carol, Dr. Fraterelli, Sean Taylor, who's not here but has been volunteered, Mihoko, and Deirdre. Okay, the next group will look at the topic of legal parentage, and that group will include Judge Hall, Jerry, Mark, who isn't here, Thad, and myself. And then the last group will look at the topic of, we'll say, genetic information and background. And Carol, did you want to be a part of that group also?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I think maybe if we could say genetic and health, medical. I mean, genetic might get kind of narrow
Okay.
because
So genetic and health information.
Yeah, genetic, well, what I would call it is birth heritage, including genetic and medical information.
I like
Okay.
birth heritage. That's a nice.
Birth
Yeah.
heritage.
Yeah.
Okay, so that this third group will focus on the topic of birth heritage, including genetic and health information.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, and Carol, you'd like to be on that one too, knowing,
Sure.
Yeah, just keep in mind serial communications. I think that
Absolutely.
it's not an
Luckily, I don't see a lot of overlap in terms of the way those two different pigs will be. One I think is going to be much more language intensive than the other.
Right. And then Laurel will be in that group. Dr. Andaya will be in that group. Jeff and Lauren Kim, who I will inform. Okay, so that's great. So yeah, each of the pigs, you can meet amongst yourselves. I think everyone, there's probably some emails already that has everyone's contact information, but I'll send out again. I think I'll send contact information to each pig. And you can decide amongst yourselves how you want to meet, what tasks, how to split up your jobs. Oh, and I guess as part of, so I'm also supposed to define the scope of each member's authority. So I think each member of each pig, their authority will be to the full scope of authority of the group itself. So like to investigate and make recommendations and use any source at your disposal. And I guess we should talk about when we should come back as a larger group and talk about findings. And they don't have to be complete recommendations, but at least a status update. And we do have to give an update to the legislature by the end of the year, and my legislative division has asked me to do that. I think I want to do it at least by November, so that I'd like to have us come back sometime in October to, update each other and have something I can report back. Do you think it makes sense to do another about a month? Does that seem okay?
Mhm.
And it is hard to try to organize everyone's schedules, but it is are Friday afternoons generally okay for people?
Not at all.
No.
I'd rather. Afternoons are hard when you're picking up and dropping kids off.
Okay.
I'd rather be at my desk for this. Personally, it's just personal opinion.
Okay. How about it? Are there any weekday mornings that might work? How about Friday mornings? Does that work for people generally? Okay.
I'm never going to have a time like that I can reserve.
Okay.
It's going to have to be done one meeting at a time to really tell you whether I'm available. But I do see your point about trying to get the big group together, either maybe the last couple of days of October or the first few days of November. But I think we need to be realistic about how much these individual groups would be able to accomplish in just a few weeks.
Yeah.
They might be able to meet and start hammering out some discussion topics, but I don't know how much is going to be done by then.
Right. Yeah. And I'm not expecting a whole, a complete, completion of the task by then. But I think, we should at least kind of touch base around that. And hopefully, and if it is, you know, that not much has been done, like hopefully it's just like a really short meeting too. So, okay, I'll look for dates at the end of October, hopefully mornings, and maybe if Friday works again, that'd be great.
Lauren, I can do the 27th, and then I'm gone for about 3 weeks. So
Okay,
just
okay,
FYI, if I'm expected to report back on this,
right.
the other one, the pig.
You're gonna be gone on October 27th?
No, that would be the last date I could meet for 3
Okay.
weeks.
Okay,
So
all right,
I'll be
I'll look at,
in another
dates on
time
that.
zone, so it won't work.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you, everyone. It looks like we have our pigs formed, and I will send each pig the contact information of the others on them. And we'll inform the folks who aren't here that they have been put on different groups. So, all right. Does anyone else have any other, well, you know what? I didn't ask if there's any public testimony. Brandon, is there anyone waiting or who wanted to testify?
There's no public attendees.
All right, great. Well, okay, if there's no one in the public who has anything to say, does anyone else have any final thoughts or questions? Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. This is really productive, and have a great Friday and great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.